Welcome to the GSMC Car Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey to the automotive world. We talk about the latest news, from new makes and models to new technology to all of the must-have options available. Whether you're a fan of the old classics, love the latest models and technology, or have never met a vehicle you didn't want to work on, the GSMC Car Podcast has something for every car enthusiast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Car Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, David Lucy Mabel. Okay, today, folks, we are going to be talking about German cars. Yes, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. It's one of my favorite topics to rant about. It's one of my favorite topics to warn people about, and it's one of my favorite topics to celebrate about. As you can see, German cars really have, a roller coaster of emotions when it comes to talking about them. Today we're going to be talking about the good. We're going to be talking about the bad. We're going to be talking about the history of German cars here in America. And we're going to be talking about, at the end, the top 5 worst German cars to own and the top 5 best German cars to own, according to my opinion and what my research has led me to believe. So in the first segment, we're going to be talking about what is good about German cars. So let's get started. Contrary to popular belief, not all German cars are bad. German cars actually have a very good reputation, not only in Europe, but around the world. Go to Japan, where Japan makes wonderful cars, but people still believe in German cars over there. Go to Africa, where there aren't any car companies out of Africa itself, any of the countries over there, but you have German cars that are basically king over there. Go to the Caribbean, go to South America. German cars are known the world over for their build quality, for their reliability, and their overall brand image. I mean, let's be honest. Anywhere you go on Earth, any country you go to, people know what a Mercedes-Benz S-Class is. I mean, it's the most common head of state car for presidents and chancellors and kings and queens and other heads of state around the world. The Mercedes-Benz S-Class is world-renowned. BMW is world-renowned. Audi is world-renowned. Volkswagen is world-renowned. I mean, let's not forget the Beetle. You know, German cars have their place in history, and they've cemented their place in the psyche of car lovers all around the world. So let's talk about what specifically is good about German cars. Not just the fact that they are known the world over, but the fact that they have superior build quality. Have you ever sat inside a Mercedes-Benz S-Class? And I have to use that as the example because even though this wasn't always the case, the Mercedes-Benz S-Class nowadays has become the pinnacle of what a luxury car ought to be. It is large. It is luxurious. It has all the necessary technology. It is built like a tank, and it's fast when it needs to be. It's comfortable when it needs to be. It offers everything a luxury car should be in one package. Not only Mercedes-Benz S-Class, even down to like the BMW 3 Series, which is an entry-level sedan in BMW's lineup. My friend Kevin has one. I mean, and his is, pushing 15 years old. This thing is built like a tank. And you're going to hear me say that a lot, but they really are. Compare that with a Cadillac CTS from the era, which, as you heard me mention in my Cadillac podcast, I mean, Cadillac has been chasing these German cars, but their build quality is just not there yet. GM, American build quality, is just not up to par with the Germans. The Germans seem to build their car around the fact that they know they're going to be driven on the Autobahn. These cars are meant to hold up at high speeds. These cars are meant to go high speeds. These cars are meant to blow others out of the water and keep their wheels on when they're pushing 100, 120, 150 miles per hour on the Autobahn. There is no shaking. There is no rattling. And there's only the good type of rolling, if I could put it that way. You're not going to find a German car with poor build quality. And even the ones that aren't the best build quality are still by far better than, let's say British cars or American cars or even Japanese cars. And Japanese cars are built very well too, but they are more reliable than having their bodies built well like a German car. So moving on from build quality, safety. I mean, when you have a car company that is always coming out with the latest technology, the latest bells and whistles, safety is obviously a priority for a car company like that. Let me mention Mercedes-Benz, their adaptive cruise control. Mercedes-Benz has had that since at least 2012. Now, many people may see that as a convenience feature, is not necessarily a safety feature, but I can attest that this is a safety feature because when you are driving on the road, you put your car on cruise control. I mean, you have the potential to get sleepy. You have the potential to maybe not focus as greatly on what's in front of you. But if you have a car that is able to measure the distance between itself and the car in front of it and then apply the brakes when it's getting too close, even when its driver may not be aware that they need to apply the brakes, that is not only safety, that is also convenience and everything that you need wrapped into one. I mean, I like to pretend like I'm a purist and say, well, I don't need adaptive cruise control. Heck, I don't even need cruise control. So I don't need a German car with all that fancy technology. But in reality, if I had it, I know I would appreciate it because I know exactly why the Germans put these technologies into their car for safety. And not only that, you're taking Mercedes-Benz versus American car companies. When Mercedes-Benz, and not just Mercedes-Benz, when BMW, when Audi, when Volkswagen began to come over to the United States, American cars compared to the European rivals, specifically from Germany in this case, were hopelessly antiquated. I mean, Mercedes-Benz was offering airbags. Mercedes-Benz was offering side impact airbags. Mercedes-Benz was offering padded dashboards before airbags were a thing. Mercedes-Benz was doing all of this, and I know this seems to be turning into an episode about Mercedes-Benz, but not only Mercedes-Benz, but BMW was sharing in this technology too. Audi was also sharing in this technology. We have to remember that these German car companies are competing against each other in Europe before they even came to America. So if Mercedes-Benz is offering it, BMW is going to offer it too, and so is Audi. Coming to America and, being in the American car scene, it really made Americans open their eyes in a sense as to how hopelessly antiquated their cars were. In the American time period of 70s to the 80s, safety wasn't the biggest priority. Not to say that safety wasn't a priority, but it wasn't the biggest priority. It was comfort and luxury in size. For the Americans, bigger meant safer, which is not always the case. German cars were smaller. German cars were not as bulky and as large and as unwieldy as American cars, but they were so much safer because of the technology and the focus that the Germans put into that. Not only that, we have to look at brand history. Now, this one, I'm specifically going to praise Mercedes-Benz for this. Mercedes-Benz started out as the Benz Motor Company with the Benz patent motor wagon back in, I believe, 1886. Carl Benz invented the modern automobile. I'm going to let you take a moment to appreciate that, because I even get chills speaking about it. He invented the modern automobile, a German gentleman that started one of the most legendary car companies that the world has ever seen, Mercedes-Benz. Not only did he invent the car company, or invent the car, he invented the idea of the modern automobile company by manufacturing them. I mean, his wife, Bertha Benz, was the first person to ever take a road trip in an automobile. She was the first mechanic. She replaced the brake pads on those cars at that time. The Benz Patent Motor Wagon, the brake pads were literally leather tacked onto wooden blocks that were pressed against the wheel to stop it, because of course at that time, when the car's top speed was 10 miles per hour, it worked. She was the first mechanic. She replaced the brake pads herself. She took her children on this journey that is still immortalized today, I believe, as the Bertha Benz Road in Germany. This is incredible brand history. No American car company can claim to invent the car. No other car company on earth can claim to invent the car. So we're talking about the technology that Benz had back in the late 1800s, in the 1880s just about. This technology, this idea, this product found its way to Japan. It found its way to England. It found its way to Italy. It found its way to the United States, and it found its way to Sweden. It found its way to South Korea. It's found its way to all of the major car producing countries on earth. A German car company has this to claim. This is its history. So when people want to poo-poo German cars, myself included, I tend to forget that, look, they invented the automobile. And not only Mercedes-Benz invented the automobile, BMW has a legendary racing history. BMW, I dare say, invented the idea of the sports sedan with their BMW 7 Series way back in the day, or whatever it was called before it was called the 7 Series. BMW, which stands for Bavarian Motor Works. I mean, BMW has long pedigree in the racing scene. Before the M Series, BMWs were a thing. They were putting, turbos in lightweight automobiles, which is seen today as a way to boost performance in the BMW 2002 Turbo. BMW invented the idea of the driver's car. Not to say that sports cars didn't exist before, but sports cars were a specific class of vehicles. There was no such thing as a sports sedan. There was no such thing as, a sport compact car. A sports car like the Corvette, like the Auburn Boattail Speedster, like those cars of the day before the German cars began to come to America, before the German cars began to do these things. Those were two-seat roadsters with open tops. That was it. But BMW took that philosophy, so to speak, and added it to their compact sedan, the 3 Series. They added it to their mid-size sedan, the 5 Series. They added it to their wagons. They added it to their large sedan, the 7 Series. BMW invented the idea of what is now known as the sport sedan. And not only were they sports sedans, they were sport luxury sedans. And even today, even though BMW reliability has never been known as the best, I would rather have some BMW models over Mercedes-Benz models for the simple fact that they are made to drive. They are made to drive, and they are enjoyable to drive. On a lesser note, you have brand image. When people hear that you own a Mercedes-Benz, or you own a BMW, or you own an Audi, I mean, maybe this is perhaps a bit shallow, maybe it's a bit pretentious, but people tend to think about you in a different light when you say that you own one of those cars, because they're expensive. Even today, when Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Audi are offering cheaper alternatives in the sub $30,000 range. I mean, these brands still have a cachet to them that, oh, you drive a Mercedes-Benz, or you drive a BMW, or you drive an Audi. You must have money. You must have good taste. You must be cultured and otherworldly. And like I said, even today with the cheaper alternatives, they still hold that reputation, so to speak. I also mentioned that not only BMW, but Mercedes-Benz got onto the sports sedan wagon, if you will. No pun intended on that. And so did Audi. And now you have these sports cars that are not only built with German engineering, but they're well built in general. So moving on to the next segment, please stay tuned. I'm going to be talking about what's bad about German cars. And stay tuned till the very end. I'm going to be talking about the worst German cars to buy and the best German cars to buy. So please stay tuned.
Are you a business owner? Someone interested in the latest news that might affect your business? Then check out the GSMC Business News Podcast, a show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. The GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Alrighty, welcome back, car lovers. So in the last segment, we talked about what is good about German cars. We talked about a bit of their history. We talked about a bit of their reputation around the world and how they basically have reputations that are unmatched by other car companies. So now we're going to be talking about what's bad, because with every good, there is also a bad, and it would behoove me to mention that so I don't seem that I'm making these cars seem as if though they are the best cars on earth. So what exactly is bad about German cars? The specifics. Everybody knows, or at least every car person knows, anybody who is even slightly well-versed in cars knows that German cars are over-engineered. Yes, they are. This has been a gripe of mine for as long as I've known about the over-engineering of German cars, because I'm a simple person. I enjoy simple things. I have simple tastes. I cannot deal with technology, and German cars just seem to have too much of it. When we look at the different philosophies of car manufacturers around the earth and car cultures around the earth, you've got American cars. American cars are mainly built for comfort and reliability. British cars seem to only be made for comfort and looks. British cars are absolutely beautiful. They're comfortable. A lot of them are luxurious. They're not reliable. Italian cars seem to live by the mantra, live fast, die young, leave a good-looking corpse. Italian cars are also gorgeous. Italian cars are known for their performance, are known for their styling. Italian cars have never been known for their engineering or their reliability. Japanese cars, efficiency is key. Same thing with South Korean cars. Swedish cars, safety above all else. Safety and luxury, not even so much styling. German cars have always been seen as engineering, technology. How can we make this hold up? How can we make this be better? How can we invent a new way to do this? And that is good when the car is new, when it's being introduced to the market, when it's when it's still young, so to speak, when it's still romantic, when it's still desirable. But after those cars begin to age, after 10, 15, 20 years, many of them don't hold up well. And let me give you some examples. I mean, there are some real life examples of this. I'm not just speaking in general terms. Let's talk about the S-Class, for example. Oh my goodness. Especially the W220 S-Class, which was produced in some markets from 1998 to 2006. It was produced in America from 2000 to 2006. My father actually owns a Mercedes-Benz S-Class from this era. And aside from the fact that this was the era of the Chrysler merger, the Daimler Chrysler, which has a bunch of negative implications in itself, let's talk about the air suspension. Oh my goodness. There is not a mechanic that we have been to with our S-Class that told us that they could fix the air suspension. It was flawed from the factory. It was flawed from the beginning. It was a design flaw. It was over-engineered. And for what? For what reason? For no reason. Because they wanted it to over-engineer it. They couldn't just slap on a couple of air shocks in the back and then call it a day like many American cars have been doing for decades. No. No, sirree. They couldn't leave it at that. They had to make it complicated. They had to put it on the front and the back. They had to make it adjustable. They had to make it rise and fall with the acceleration and the deceleration of the car. They had to make it, to the point where they believed so much into their design it didn't have a failsafe. If your airmatic failed on you in a Mercedes-Benz S-Class from this era, you were out of luck. And what I mean by out of luck, if it decided to go off on you in the middle of a parking lot and you're 1,000 miles away from home, you're getting your car towed. You can't drive it away because the car will sink. The bodywork will literally almost rest on the ground, and you will not be able to move the car because the wheels will scrub against the interior fender wells of the car, making it either undrivable or extremely unsafe to drive. And not only that, the car will chime at you and tell you that it is unsafe to drive and have you park it. So they can tell you that the car is unsafe to drive. They can tell you when your service is due. They can design this air suspension to the point where as you're accelerating the car, lowers. And this is way before cars started doing this nowadays. We're talking about technology that is, upwards of 20 something years old here. Because Mercedes-Benz has been doing this since the mid 90s. They can do all of that, but they can't design it with a fail safe. So I know my Cadillac had an air suspension in the back, air compressor, simple air shocks. If the air shocks went out, you could still drive the car for 100,000 miles and never even notice that it was a problem, except the fact that your car would ride a slightly bit lower in the back. Mercedes-Benz couldn't design it in such a way to make you be able to drive your car if your airmatic was giving problems. And not only that, it wasn't if the airmatic was giving problems. If one of the airmatic pumps, because there's one and one of the airbags, I should say, for each of the four wheels, if one of it goes bad, then the whole thing goes bad. It's not like you're going to be riding lopsided. If one of them goes bad, then the whole thing does, because the car senses that one of it's going bad, so it doesn't pump up the other ones, and it doesn't allow you to drive it. I mean, I can have a whole podcast on the Mercedes-Benz airmatic system in general, how annoying it is and how flawed it is and how terribly unreliable it is. But I'm going to move on because I don't want to bore you all. So moving on, you have the pneumatic door locks and other pneumatic functions in some of these cars. I'm looking at the Mercedes-Benz S-Class again. The door locks are pneumatic. They are not only electric, but they are pneumatic. Pneumatic means air. Pneumatic means pressurized air in this sense. There is a PCV valve control box in the trunk, and these have different valves that they channel air through to operate the door locks, the trunk lock, the headrests, the soft closed doors, anything that you can think of in the car that should just be electrical that runs with a regular old fuse is air powered. Why? Why is my biggest question. Why? There are cars who do this that simply have electrical components without an air component. It's done with a fuse. If it goes bad, you change the fuse or you change the relay. This has a fuse, a relay, and a valve system with pressurized air. Again, why? Why does it exist? Why does it have to be that complicated? Why does it have to be that over-engineered? Why give people the headache of having to deal with that foolishness? Because these things may be gimmicks when you come out with the car at like the Geneva Motor Show or the New York Motor Show or wherever the motor shows are when they unveil the new cars. These are just gimmicks. These don't last. These don't last 5 years, let alone 10 or 15 or 20 years. It's annoying. It's annoying. It doesn't need to exist. It can be done in a simpler fashion and accomplish the same effect. But because it's Germany, because it's German cars, they have to be over-engineered. I feel like they don't feel good unless a car is over-engineered. We have... Not only are those some of the most annoying problems with the Mercedes-Benz S-Class in specifically, but you have BMW with their electrical problems. BMW's Vanos unit in any of their cars, really, which is basically their which is basically their variable valve timing. That goes bad on their cars. Variable valve timing, the Japanese have it in Honda in the form of VTEC. That doesn't go bad. When do you ever hear about a Honda VTEC going bad? But in the BMW, it's going to go bad. Why? Because it's over-engineered. It's too complicated. It doesn't need to be that complicated. And we are talking about annoying problems, but let's not forget to mention the fatal problems that these cars tend to experience. And when I mean by fatal problems in the car world, I am talking about if the car gives you this problem, it's done. It's totaled. It's scrapped. Even if the car is brand new, they can't fix it because it's going to cost $50,000 to source a new engine. And yes, I'm being serious about that. Let's talk about the BMW valve seals on the V8s. Saying that a BMW V8 is reliable is like saying the grass is pink. It's not true. It's a lie. It's a fantasy. BMW V8s are not reliable. They never have been, and for the foreseeable future, they never will be. Why? They're valve seal covers. They're valve seals in general. Massive oil leaks. Premature engine failure. These are the things that BMW owners with their beloved 7 Series go into the mechanic, and these are the things that they hear. This is like a read it and weep type of situation. They give you the bill, it's $50,000 because you need a new engine in your Alpina B7 or some foolishness, and you read it and then you weep. Because this is something, I'm channeling my inner Tyler Hoovey here, because this is something that I've seen Tyler Hoovey do on on YouTube. I mean, this is something, I was like, oh, but I got this car for a good deal. The owner said that it ran properly. It just, burnt a bit of oil. I didn't think it was that big of it. No, honey. No. This is a problem from the factory. BMW V8s are known for having bad valve seals, and they burn oil, and this causes premature engine failure. And these things are so difficult to work on that I've seen it done before with Tyler Hoovey's Alpina B7. The whole engine had to come out, and it had to be torn apart and the valve seals had to be replaced. And of course, the engine computer has to be recalibrated. And of course, because it was burning oil, then your catalytic converters were going to go bad. So those have to be changed. It's just a domino effect. One problem in the engine causes a problem in the engine computer, causes a problem in the exhaust, causes a problem in the emissions, causes a problem in the catalytic converter, causes a problem in this, causes a problem in that, to the point where a problem that should have cost $2,000 to fix, and that's being really, really unrealistically generous, is going to end up causing $10,000 to fix. And if you go to the dealer, goodness, they're going to charge you an arm, a leg, a rack of ribs, and a foot for them to deal with all of that. So that's going to be, $15,000 at the end of the day because of just one problem that you let go unnoticed. And then you moved on, and then it causes a bunch of other problems. And that's just in BMW. Why don't we talk about Mercedes-Benz S63 AMG engines? Those V12 engines were known for their head bolt issues. These head bolts would get stripped. I mean, I guess Cadillac got the idea from Mercedes-Benz when it came to having their North Star engine head bolts be stripped, because this was Mercedes-Benz had been doing this for a time before North Star even existed. So those engines, let me tell you about that. I have seen repair bills for car YouTubers that had these engines, these V12 engines from Mercedes-Benz, specifically the AMG variants. These cars cost, oh my goodness, with the V12, probably over $130,000 when new. You have it for a couple of years, it depreciates like a rock. Head bolt goes bad. Take it to Mercedes-Benz dealer. I once saw a repair bill to replace the engine because they couldn't even fix it. $54,000. Take that and mull over it for a few seconds. $54,000. This is a car you've owned. This is a car you've loved. This is a car you've driven. This is a car you've taken care of. Only for it to slap you in the face and say, okay, I have a repair bill of $54,000. Read it and weep, buddy. I mean, that's basically what it's doing. It's infuriating. It gets my blood pressure raised when I hear about things like this. These cars are too expensive to fix outside of warranty. They are too expensive to find parts for. These are like gold digging girlfriends. You go through a midlife crisis, you divorce your wife, or in this case, by what I mean by wife, your good reliable vehicle, and then you go for the secretary. You go for the young German the young German car that looks nice and you think is going to treat you well. And after a few months, things are looking fine, things are looking dandy, and then she starts showing you her true colors. She starts breaking down on you. Then she starts commanding massive repair bills. They turn into money pits real quick. My dad's Mercedes-Benz S-Class has been nothing but trouble since he bought it 5 years ago. And he's still in that honeymoon phase with the car. He still continues to dump money into it. And, when is he going to stop? We don't know. And not only that, even when the parts are hard to find, they are hard to find for several reasons. The fact that many of these cars are still built in Germany and brought over, and the fact that it's not easy to find these cars in junkyards. People go through the mindset of, okay, this car costs a lot of money. I'm not going to put it into a junkyard. This is a Mercedes-Benz. I'm going to spend the money to save it so it doesn't end up having to be in the junkyard. Which, if anybody ever tells you that, that's the voice of Satan speaking. Don't listen to them. Cast them out. Because, goodness, it's a car. It's going to need to go to a junkyard at some point. Especially if it's giving, $54,000 head bolt issues that aren't going to be solved. I mean, that thing needs to be going to the junkyard. If you want a German car that bad, buy it while it's still under warranty. So stay tuned for the next segment in which I discuss how German cars became popular in America and why they are now seen as the standard as far as luxury goes instead of American cars. And please stay tuned till the very end when I talk about the top 5 best German cars and the top 5 worst German cars. So thank you, and continue to listen, please, after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, my wonderful car people. So now we're going to be discussing the rise of German luxury cars, specifically here in America. I briefly mentioned this actually in my Cadillac episode when I recorded a podcast about what happened to the Cadillac Motor Company and how it got here in the first place. So I briefly mentioned that German cars basically became a presence in America in the 70s and a strong presence in the 80s, and how they basically dethroned the American idea of luxury. So this is exactly how they did this. A long time ago, just a bit of history. America was really seen as the pinnacle for car construction, the pinnacle for luxury, the pinnacle for everything as far as car culture and car manufacturing went. We had a giant highway system. Henry Ford made good use of the assembly line. Henry Olds with the Oldsmobile runabout back in 1903 basically invented the idea of the assembly line for constructing automobiles, and Henry Ford capitalized on that a few years later with the Ford Model T. Let's say Europe was the birthplace of the automobile. America was its cradle. America was its childhood. America is where it grew up and played with its friends and developed a sense of identity. And American cars were always seen as superior. This basically presented itself in the form of the luxury car companies, which were, at least from the American perspective, everything good about a car boiled down to the purest form. I mean, the purest form of the automobile was seen as the luxury automobile. This was it. This was the highest form. This was the purest form. This was its completion in perfection. I mean, this was the most perfect form, if I may use a philosophical term in there. So when you had car companies like Packard, I'm going to mention Packard because Packards were amazing automobiles as far as luxury went back in the day. You had companies like Cadillac. You had companies like Ford, which had the Lincoln, which the more upscale versions of Lincolns were branded as Continentals. And you had companies like Chrysler. And I know I poo-poo Chrysler today, but back then, Chrysler was a real force to be reckoned with their Imperials and their Chrysler Windsors and the Chrysler Letter series as far as those cars go. I mean, these cars were American luxury. This was a time. This was something that is looked back on and it is romanticized. And then the oil crisis hit. Yes, like I mentioned back in Cadillac and in the CA Corvette and in so many other podcasts, the oil crisis is a huge deal when it comes to, I guess, car history, not only here in America, but also abroad. this is when American cars were really struggling. American cars had always been seen as, even though they were large and they were luxurious and they were comfortable, by other people across the world, they were always seen as large, inefficient, and excessive, and not really cars, but more of living room couches that you drive. These were not cars in terms of handling or in terms of sport, as the Europeans would say, because Europeans had always been doing sporty things with their cars, you know, Jaguar, BMW, Italians with Ferrari and Lamborghini. They saw American cars as being fat and overweight, essentially. Take that as you wish. But in a sense, the oil crisis made Americans see that their cars were fat and overweight. They were heavy. They were unwieldy. And Americans, being as prideful as we are, as proud as we are, we continued to soldier on. We were like, you know what? There's an oil crisis, but we're just going to continue building our cars the way we know how, and nobody's going to stop us because Cadillac is still the standard of the world, and America is still number one, and blah blah blah. Yeah, America was number one. But America would no longer be number one after the Germans had anything to do with it. So in came the Germans. I mean, the Germans had always been building large, luxurious cars in Germany. But their interpretation of luxury, their definition of luxury, had been fundamentally different. For them, it was comfort, which is a component in all luxury, but it was engineering. Engineering above all else. Let's take an example. Mercedes-Benz S600 Pullman back in the 1960s. This car was the pinnacle of German engineering at the time. And not just German engineering, the pinnacle of car engineering in general. This car, everything was hydraulically powered. Everything was hydraulically operated, down to the door locks, the windows, the suspension. Everything was hydraulic, because they wanted to keep the car lightweight without having to install any bulky electrical motors in there, and they wanted to be able to keep the styling of the car intact without having to widen up the door cards to fit electrical motors, to fit fuses, to fit everything. So they worked all the way around that and did everything hydraulic. Well, let me tell you, there has only been maybe 3 or 4, to my knowledge, of these cars that have been fully restored, because they were that complex. Even people today, with the technology that we have, can't figure out how to fully restore these cars and get their engineering to the way it used to be when these cars were new on the market. That's insane. But that shows you how the philosophy of German luxury began, was with engineering. When these cars came over to America, they were seen as exotic. They were seen as, I guess, futuristic in a sense. And they were not only seen as that, but they were reliable compared to American luxury cars. And not only were they reliable, they offered performance. They offered performance in the sense that you could have a 4,000-pound S-Class and still be able to hit 100-something miles per hour and still be able to take corners with it. Not, let's say, a Cadillac Fleetwood, in which maybe in the time 85 miles per hour may have been the top speed. Taking a corner, you better hold on for dear life because the body roll is ready to tip you out of the car. I mean, this was completely different. So when the oil crisis hit, Americans began to see themselves, or not themselves, their cars, as fat and ugly and overweight and unwieldy. And then Germans came in with their cars and be like, look, this is the slim alternative to what Americans have been doing for all of these years. The Germans came through and they took over by storm, and they dethroned Cadillac as the standard of the world. They dethroned Lincoln. They dethroned Imperial because those car companies, it took them so long to change that they couldn't keep up. People started buying small, nimble cars like the BMW 2002 Turbo. They started buying sports cars like the Mercedes-Benz SL, which was very much like the Corvette and very much like the Thunderbird when it had come out about 20-something years earlier. This was a new era of American car ownership. I mean, and at this time, the Japanese began to come in with their small, more efficient cars as far as just daily drivers go. So when you had Americans having these different options, one option for efficiency and reliability in the form of daily drivers that the Japanese offered, and another alternative for those who were rich, those who were well off, to buy luxury cars that actually performed, that actually were good, that the Germans offered. American cars began to scramble. This is when America began to finally downsize after they realized what the Germans were doing. And because fuel prices were going through the roof, I mean, people just couldn't afford to put gas in their cars anymore. And this is, the luxury cars began to downsize and try to become more sporty. And if you remember what I said in Cadillac, gave it their all. I mean, did a bunch of things that, Cadillac is still not recovering, but still feeling the effects of today. And you had some cars that were more aimed at the Japanese rivals, like the Chevy Chevette, the Chevy Vega, the Ford Pinto. Those cars were seen as like domestic imports in a sense. The Dodge Colt that came out later, these cars were designed to be small and efficient to combat the Japanese cars. So when you saw the German cars changing the luxury game over here in America, I mean, it caused a bit of scare, a bit of fear to be instilled in the American car companies. And these had driving dynamics that were superior. They were reliable, and younger generations, which, as we all know, as much as we seem to not like the younger generation are the trailblazers. They are tomorrow. They set the trends that will be popular tomorrow. The younger generations, those who were young professionals coming out with college degrees and whatnot, they weren't looking for big floaty American luxury cars, which at a time, these weren't just seen as old people cars. These were seen as successful people cars. But by the time the younger generation began to be able to rise and make money and buy cars of their own, they began to see the traditional American luxury as being for old people. And they began to see the German cars as the new and exciting thing that people are going to buy if they were young professionals. And that's how the Germans basically established themselves in the American car market. This happened, and then Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Volkswagen, Audi, they began to build factories here in America. Once they began to build factories here in America, they became more competitive. Their costs were lower. They cemented their place in the American psyche. And for a while there, these cars were different than American luxury cars. American luxury cars were no longer trying to compete with the Germans. They conceded the fact that they were now seen as old people cars. So you had Cadillac, you had Lincoln, and you had Chrysler, what was left of Imperial at the time. They just started marketing themselves to old people. And they were like, you know what? We're going to read the writing on the wall. We're seen as old people now, so we're going to capitalize on that, and we're going to go for it. And that's basically how German cars established themselves on the throne of American luxury, or at least the luxury car in the American psyche. It was different from the American luxury car. It was new, it was exciting, it was efficient, it was reliable. That's what Germany was here to offer here in America. So stay tuned for the next segment in which we will finally discuss the best and worst German cars, in my opinion, to buy, especially to buy used. So please stay tuned after the break.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings-on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
Okay, welcome back, wonderful car people. Now we're going to discuss which are the best and worst German cars to buy used or to buy in general as far as my opinion goes. And this has been researched by me, this has been seen by me, and part of it's just simply from my own driving experience because I've driven some of the cars on this list. So let's begin. The best German cars to buy. I basically chose this in terms of reliability, in terms of what they offer, most bang for their buck, and basically how they're going to treat you after they are no longer under warranty and you are using them. BMW 3 Series. Yes, this is the entry-level BMW. This has been the entry-level BMW for quite some time now. And this is a car that, especially for middle-class people in suburban areas, upper middle class, this is a car that's seen as a good first car for college graduate, or not college graduates, high school graduates, high school seniors. This is a car, for example, people would buy for their children. My friend Kelly had one. My friend Kevin has one. These were a fairly common sight growing up in Southwest Florida for those who wanted their children to have a nicer car for their first car, something that was well built, something that was very reliable, and as far as German cars go, easy to maintain. BMW 3 Series was basically a no-brainer. Of course, if you get into some of the more performance-oriented versions of these cars, those are when you have a bit of problems. The Vanos unit is known for going back. Like I said, this is their variable valve timing in BMW cars. So those are just some things to watch out for as far as reliability goes. But the BMW 3 Series is a good car to buy if you're looking for a reliable, relatively cheap German car. Number 4, Mercedes-Benz C-Class. The Mercedes-Benz C-Class is basically the direct competitor to the BMW 3 Series. And the reason why I include it as a step higher on the list is because this doesn't seem to have the problems that the BMW 3 Series has with their variable valve timing. And this is also offered in the C55 AMG, I believe, of the time period, which I've seen being hailed on YouTube as the most reliable AMG car ever built. C-classes are not known for giving problems. Of course, they're not as nice as an E-class or an S-class, but we have to keep in mind this is the entry-level position. So they're going to offer luxury, they're going to offer build quality. Maybe they're not going to offer the latest levels of technology that some other cars from Germany offered at the time period, which when you're talking about German cars and talking about German cars that are used, that's exactly what you want. You want something that's a bit less technology laden and more build quality and reliability focused. Moving on to number 3, the Mercedes-Benz ML class. This has long been a crossover SUV in the Mercedes-Benz lineup. These are probably the best. Oh goodness, they are probably the best German SUVs you can buy. I didn't include the X3 on the list from BMW. I didn't include the X5 because, some of those have the V8 engines, and the BMW V8s are not good. They are not good. I'm not going to even, sugarcoat that. But the ML class from Mercedes-Benz, our mechanic that we used to have a while ago had one that had over 200,000 miles on it, and it was holding up just fine. I mean, the ML class is long been hailed as a very reliable crossover SUV from Germany. I'm not going to pretend like it's the prettiest car out there. Some of the older ones had those big, ugly plastic black bumpers on them. But if we're not looking for styling, we're not critiquing styling. If we're looking for reliability and we're looking for basically what makes them the best, this is something that is very, very desirable, very good to look at, and they are beginning to be a bit cheaper, and not just beginning to be a bit cheaper, they've been cheaper for a while now because this is an older model, but these could potentially be a good investment. They're well appointed. They're like an E-class level of luxury, but in the SUV market. And they are comfortable. They have 2 rows of seats. They seat 5 people, and they've got a well-appointed cargo area. I mean, if you're looking for a German luxury crossover, don't go to BMW, go to Mercedes-Benz and look at the ML from years past. Those cars, I haven't heard anything bad about them, which is really rare when it comes to Mercedes-Benz or German cars in general. It seems like everybody has something bad to say about them. Moving on to the number 2 spot on the best German cars to buy, we have the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. I love the E-Class. I love everything about it. I think it's great. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's wonderful. I think it's been great. The E-Class is, in my mind, what a car should be. This is the pinnacle of the car in my world, as far as my humble opinion goes. The E-Class is comfortable. The E-Class is not fast, but it is well balanced as far as performance goes. It's reliable, which is a huge sticking point for me. And it is built well. It is built like a tank. It's heavy. It feels heavy. It feels safe. And on top of it feeling safe, it actually is safe. You can't really go wrong with a Mercedes-Benz E-Class. Not to say that these are going to be free of their gremlins, because there was, some time with the Chrysler merger, of course, those cars gave some electrical issues. But we have a 2000 Mercedes-Benz E-Class, as well as a 2003 Mercedes-Benz S-Class, S430 to be specific. And our E-Class, I mean, we've had it not for an extremely long amount of time, but you can tell this car was better built, and better engineered than other cars of the era. And it was way more reliable than the S-Class, because you have a car that is luxurious, you have a car that's sporty, you have a car that's reliable, and it's not a ticking time bomb like an S-Class is. An S-Class, with all the technology, as nice as it is, as wonderful as it is, it will eventually slap you in the face. It will eventually go bad. It will eventually do something that you are not wanting it to do, and it goes kaput. An E-Class is not going to do that. And an E-Class is a lot more versatile as far as body styling goes, as far as options go. You can get an E-Class in an AMG variant, and you can still get an E-Class wagon today, which, thank goodness, Mercedes-Benz has not let the station wagon die in the form of the E-Class. The E-Class is my favorite German car, as far as any German car that is offered today. Mercedes-Benz E-Class, in my opinion, you can't go wrong with it. Reliable, easy to fix, and cheaper relative to the S-Class. You get the Mercedes-Benz 300D in the top of the list for the best German cars to buy. The Mercedes-Benz 300D, anybody can argue with me about this, and I will argue, I will fight tooth and nail for this car, is the best automobile ever made. I don't care what anybody says. It's the best car ever made of all time. The best car. These cars, 3, 4, 500,000 miles is not unheard of. I have seen these cars in junkyards. The leather is not cracked. The leather is still supple, and it's still smooth to the touch, and it is still comfortable when you sit in it. The build quality of these cars is unheard of in modern standards. The Mercedes-Benz 300D was basically the predecessor to today's E-Class. Not surprised. That's why I love the E-Class so much, because it has 300D royal lineage in it, if I could put it that way. And they were offered with a diesel engine, and that's why it's 300D, not 300E, because the 300E, E means Einsprung in German. I know I probably butchered that. That means fuel injection. So that was a gasoline engine. The 300D diesel is the one to have. These cars were used and are still used as bush taxis in Africa. We're talking about places in the African bush that are cut off from modern car companies, modern car repair shops. And these are cars that are kept up with little to no maintenance. They're not pretty. They are not fast. But are they reliable? Are they built well? Absolutely. I have seen these Mercedes-Benz 300Ds sell for several grand with 463,000 miles on them. And many of them have reached 1 million miles. I mean, these are the best cars ever made. There's no way to put it. You have luxury, you have comfort, you have build quality, and you have reliability. Those are the pinnacle of what a car should be. This is like someone took everything a car should be and they boiled it down, and then the Mercedes-Benz 300D from the 1980s was born from that, the purification of what a car should be. This is a car in its pure form, and I will argue tooth and nail if anybody tries to tell me that this is not the best car ever made. Moving on to the worst German cars to buy, and to own. These cars, you definitely don't want to own them outside of warranty. If you're going to buy them, and some of them are not even still made anymore, thank goodness, but if you're going to buy them, be prepared to spend copious amounts of money keeping them up, and always keep in the back of their mind that you're probably going to end up having to junk it or get rid of it at some point. Number 5, this is not a specific model. Any BMW with a V8 engine. Like I ranted earlier, valve seal problems, massive engine failure. It's not worth it. Don't even say you got it for a good deal. It's not worth it. If you say you got it for a good deal and you can fix it, or you know a guy, that's Satan talking. Don't listen to him. It's not worth it. Any Mercedes-Benz with a V12 engine comes into number 4. This is also equally as terrible. This is also really bad. Don't do it. That's Satan speaking. Say, oh, well, this S600 from 2005 is only being offered for $4,000. This is a good deal. Don't do it. That engine is going to fail. You're going to end up being stuck with a bill, either to repair the car or to have it towed to the junkyard and having to lose the money that you spent in buying it and the money that you spent in keeping it up. It's not worth it. There are more reliable versions of the S-Class available. These cars, I think they're great as far as performance goes, but as far as sheer reliability, it's one of the worst cars you can buy, which is a shame because Mercedes-Benz also makes the best car on earth, the Mercedes 300D, like I mentioned earlier. Mercedes-Benz S-Class, number 3, and I am going to target a specific generation because not all of them were bad. The W220, built from 1998 to 2006, or here in America from 2000 to 2006. This is the one that my dad has. This car is a genuine basket case. I know if he were awake right now, my dad would probably scold me for saying this, but it's a money pit. It's a gold-digging girlfriend that sucks you dry, and then you're going to end up having to break up with her, or in this case, drop it off at the junkyard. It's nice. It's pretty. I've driven it. It's fun to drive, but it's simply just not a good car. Electrical problems. electrical problems. This was from the Chrysler era, and we know how much Chrysler can't even build an economy car, let alone a luxury car. They collaborated with Mercedes-Benz for a few years there, and this was one of their heathen spawn, if I could put it this way, this generation of the S-Class. This is not good. I don't know how else to describe it. Aromatic suspension is crap. Electrics, crap. General reliability and serviceability as far as any of those goes is spotty at best if you don't go to a place that makes the car like Mercedes-Benz. It's a headache to own. It's more of a headache to own than it is a pleasure to drive. And that's what makes a bad car, in my opinion. And then you have the BMW 7 Series. Basically because of the V8 engine, valve seal problems, electrical issues, transmission, anything that could go wrong does go wrong on a BMW 7 Series, so avoid it. And avoid any variants of it too, including the Alpina B7, and the Audi Allroad. I didn't know this existed until Doug DeMuro crushed one with his Land Rover Defender a few years ago and put the video on YouTube. At the time, before I was privy to how bad these cars were, I was like, oh my gosh, he's, destroying a perfectly good car. It could have been resold after it was repaired. No. I was speaking out of my ignorance. Poor me. Bad car. Designed to fail, as far as Tyler Hoovey goes, because he has one. He said that it was designed to fail. Timing chain is way like at the back of the engine, and you have to disassemble the engine to do the timing chain, and that needs to be done every it's some foolishness. I mean, it's a wagon. I love wagons, but it was like more of an off-roady wagon, kind of like a Subaru Outback, but a luxury version of that here in America. It was odd. It didn't really have a market segment. It wasn't very pretty, and it was terribly unreliable. So that's basically my spiel on the German car, the good, the bad, the ugly. And this is what I have for you this week. So thank you very much for tuning in to the GSMC Car Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I hope you enjoyed listening. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and please leave us a like and a follow, which it really helps us. And I hope to hear from you all soon, and I will continue to be here, and I will be there for the next episode. So thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the GSMC Car Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed today's episode.